Get ready, Britain, here we go. The Abdul Azidi case exposes something astonishing. Next.
The top story on GB News tonight. Voters in Rochdale in Greater Manchester have got less than an hour now to cast their ballot in tonight's by-election, with polling stations closing at 10 o'clock. The ballot will decide who'll replace veteran Labour MP Sir Tony Lloyd, who died in January. There are 11 candidates on the ballot paper. The results are expected tomorrow. Full coverage right through the night here on GB News tonight as well. The main news today is that the Home Secretary says police officers will be automatically suspended if they're charged with certain criminal offences. The comments came after the Sarah Everard inquiry found Wayne Couzens should never have been a police officer. Couzens killed Sarah Everard in 2021 and her family says she died because she would never have got into a stranger's car if he hadn't been a police officer. The inquiry chair, Lady Eilish Angelini, warned without a radical overhaul of policing practices and culture, there's nothing to stop another Couzens operating in plain sight. The Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, says the force is trying to learn from its mistakes. Hotels housing asylum seekers are costing the taxpayer £15 million a day, with Labour accusing the government of blowing its £1 billion budget. Treasury figures suggest the Home Office spent £4.3 billion more than budgeted on asylum accommodation last year. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says it demonstrates the complete chaos in the system. And it comes as the latest figures show illegal migration has fallen, but legal migration is up. The government data reveals small boat arrivals in last year were down 36% on the previous year, which was a record year. However, more than 62,000 people were granted asylum in 2023. That's the highest level on record. Now, the delicate subject of assisted dying is the focus of a warning to the government that a plan is needed if laws are passed first on Jersey or the Isle of Man on the subject. Rallying the cry is Dame Esther Ranson, who's calling for a fresh debate and a possible referendum on the subject, saying the current legislation is a mess. She recently revealed she'd joined the Dignitas clinic in Switzerland after being diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Hundreds of residents have had to move out of their homes in Aberdeen in Scotland today after they were found to contain dangerous crumbling concrete known as RAAC, R-A-A-C. Last year, some schools and hospitals across the UK had to close when they were identified as being at risk of RAAC panels making buildings collapse. Around 500 houses were found to be affected, and Aberdeen City Council is rehoming tenants from around 300 council properties. Now, the inquest into the death of Prince and Princess Michael of Kent's son-in-law will open tomorrow. Buckingham Palace announced 45-year-old Thomas Kingston, who was married to Lady Gabriella Windsor, died suddenly at an address in the Cotswolds on Sunday. Police said there were no suspicious circumstances. Lady Gabriella has today paid tribute to her late husband, describing his death as a great shock to the whole family. Gloucestershire Coroner's Court confirmed the inquest will open tomorrow at 2 o'clock. For the very latest news stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on the screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, earlier today, I came into possession of some incredible information relating to Abdul Azidi, the twice-failed asylum seeker and sex offender who doused a woman and a child with a corrosive substance in Clapham. But the real story here is much, much bigger than Abdul Azidi. What I'm about to reveal shows two things. Firstly, the astonishingly low value that our asylum system places on public safety, specifically a woman's right not to suffer life-changing chemical burns at the hands of a rogue asylum seeker, but also, and I think this is the much bigger story, it appears that for the price of a second-hand Vauxhall Corsa, you can essentially buy permanent residency in Britain, even if you are on the sex offenders register. Abdul Azidi, originally from Afghanistan, came to Britain illegally in the back of a lorry. He tried to claim asylum in 2016, was rejected, he tried again and was rejected again, But then he converted to Christianity, and in 2020, at the third attempt, he was allowed to stay in Britain. In the meantime, though, he'd been found guilty of charges of sexual assault and indecent exposure. The victim has since come forward and said that she thinks he definitely should have been deported. Instead, he avoided jail and was made to sign the sex offenders register for 10 years, as well as carry out 200 hours of unpaid work. And then, as we all know, he went on to douse a woman and child in a corrosive substance, leaving them with life-changing injuries, causing mass panic across our capital city before apparently throwing himself in the Thames. Now, the first angle on this is what little value is placed on protecting the public from monsters like Yazidi. A Freedom of Information request, which GBNews can exclusively reveal, shows that Abdul Yazidi claimed legal aid. Hardly a shock. When he was arrested for his sex crimes, his solicitor fees were 159 quid. Then, when it went to court, the solicitor costs were £1,114 and the barrister cost us 1,280 quid. So the criminal convictions cost in total was £2,580. Now, Yazidi tried to claim asylum in Britain 3 times between 2016 and 2020. So according to the Ministry of Justice data, that cost just £2,635.20. So the grand total of the cost for his criminal case for sexual offences and then his civil asylum cases is just £5,189.99. Now, I know a lot of people watching this right now will be jumping up and down saying, that's hardly any money at all. That's great. We've hardly paid anything for this guy. Yeah. Well, let me put it to you like this, OK? That's all it costs for a lunatic who arrives illegally in the back of a lorry to have the freedom to rampage around Britain, dousing women and children with a corrosive substance. £5,200 is the value of those people's lives, is it? But the big story for me is this. It is simply not true that every single asylum seeker is poor and destitute. They're not. I was told directly by an impeccable source with inside knowledge of the Home Office that some people fly business class into major UK airports from countries like Egypt and Turkey and then claim asylum. These people clearly have money. They would not need to claim legal aid. They could just pay for their legal costs themselves. And indeed, those legal costs are means tested. Well, the cost of breaking into Britain and going through 2 failed asylum claims, miraculously discovering the Christian faith and then being accepted at the 3rd attempt would cost you, as we can reveal now, somewhere in the region of just £2,635. That's it. £2,635 is apparently the price that we value the right to live in Britain, even if you've entered illegally. That is hardly a deterrent, is it? Everybody knows that we barely deport anybody. And now, everyone all over the world knows that if they've got £2,635, they could land at Heathrow Airport tomorrow and end up with a British passport within a couple of years. If you decided that you wanted to become a sex offender at some stage during that process, that would set you back around £2,400. And, of course, we would still allow you to stay. The grand total there is £5,189.99. So there we have it. What the Abdul Yazidi case appears to reveal is that for the price of a second-hand Vauxhall Corsa, you can be given the right to live in Britain indefinitely, even if you are on the sex offenders register. Let's get the thoughts of my panel. Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. That's wrong. He's now a popular Conservative, isn't he? And indeed, we have former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Right, look, so, Alison, that's what it costs now. If you land at Heathrow Airport and you decide that you want to claim asylum in Britain and you've got £2,600, essentially you can stay, even if you are a sex maniac.
Yeah, it doesn't sound great, does it? It's probably correct that Yazidi will have paid more than £2,635 for the journey. So on the truck, or, I mean, going rate for coming across the channel is £4,000. These people have got money, Patrick, as you say. The thing that really gets me about this is legal aid in our country for people who are born here, paid British taxes all their lives. Legal aid is a very, very strict means tested. all right? So if you've got slightly above, not very much money, you're not going to have access to British justice. But these people who clearly have got money, who've paid for their illegal arrival in this country, they are eligible for legal aid. And I should also add that you said that he had this sex offenders register thing. A person from the Home Office was supposed to be at the tribunal to say that Ezidi's being on the sex offenders register disqualified him from being considered for asylum. But once again, the system is so broken. It's got so many people coming in. They cannot deal with it. And this is the kind of runaround that the British people are being given.
No, indeed. I mean, this is an open invitation now. You can just turn up from a country that we don't have a returns agreement with. You can fly in, essentially, land at Heathrow Airport or wherever else, and you just know that if you just long it out a little bit and you've got £2.5 grand in your back pocket, you will end up staying in Britain.
Is that right, Patrick? Because I'm concerned, as Alison has just said, about the legal aid costs, and if this man had money to his name, I don't know whether he did or not, he should have paid it himself. But that's not particularly the big issue for me. This is a few thousand quid of taxpayers' money. Billions of taxpayers' money gets wasted pretty quickly. What's terrible to me is that the answer was yes, that you can stay. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It should be a few £1,000s to get your case listened to. And then we can argue about whether the taxpayer pays for that because the person's impecunious or whether the individual should pay for it because he's arrived in business class. But how do we say yes to this man? Alison's already pointed out that the Home Office didn't rock up. Some Baptist minister apparently says this guy's converted to Christianity. I don't know whether he converted to Christianity or sex offending first. The answer should have been...
It was actually sex offending.
Yes, it was sex offending first and then Christianity.
It was,
Redemption.
So the answer should have been no. That's the problem in the system. And how many years did this take?
Well, 2016 to, ultimately 2020 when he was given leave to remain.
4 years. I think the decision, you should be able to reach a pretty clear decision in, 24 hours, 48? Maybe 4 days? This is absolutely ludicrous. So to my mind, the cost is interesting. Congratulations to you and GBNews for putting in that Freedom of Information request. That's the sort of stuff we need to know. But I'm willing to put aside the cost. It's that we got the wrong decision and it took too long.
And it's not just that cost. So the Migration Watch says that since the small boats crisis started, it's been $315 million spent on legal aid. But then all the real stuff starts kicking in, the $15 million a day on hotels. You know?
I mean, my point here, Matthew, is that this is how cheap it is to essentially get into Britain through the back door.
Well, it's testament to a system that's completely failed, that has absolutely collapsed, and it's collapsed under the Tory watch. We're in the 14th year of a Tory-led government, and we have 130,000 files sitting there which haven't been sorted, going back years, and we've got the costs of people in hotels rising, and it's even more expensive to keep somebody in an RAF base than it is in a hotel.
Yeah.
So it's a sign of failure. The system has completely failed, and we need to get those 130,000 backlogs sorted and people who shouldn't be here sent home.
It's even worse than that, because they've just admitted, haven't they, that they've fast-tracking, they've essentially got asylum for asylum seekers, which is basically they've suddenly processed 60,000 odd of them. They haven't checked them properly. We've got no idea if they have got any terrorist links at all. And we've seen that in this country time and again. Somebody's been through the asylum process and ends up stabbing 3 men in a park.
Yeah,
you know?
and the idea as well, by the way, that if you happen to be really wealthy and just overtly gaming the system, and you've come from a country like Egypt or whatever, and you land here and you can pay for your own costs, what this also shows is that you don't even need to employ a good lawyer. Ezidi will have just been given the cheapest possible lawyers
completely.
and has had 3 goes at it, right, which we paid for, and even then he's got through.
It's not clear to me why he could have 3 goes.
Why nobody can explain to me why we can't get to a yes or no answer within 24 or 48 hours. How complex is this case? It's because of the goddamn bureaucracy that this drags on for 4 years. I agree, he's hardly hired Ironside, has he, as his barrister, right? I mean,
that's the one for people of a certain age.
He's got some crummy solicitor who ticks some boxes on a form. So the problem is that we then said yes.
It's not just some crummy solicitor. There's a bunch of immigration lawyers. They know all the tricks. I recently wrote about the baptism for asylum scam. Church of England said, we've never heard of that. They've now got an urgent inquiry into it. So someone like that, his his last resort is, I've sexually abused someone, I've decided I'm going to be a Christian. How stupid is our system?
We'll give you British
We need to sort the system. We need to get that backlog sorted, not just by waving people through, but by actually processing and properly scutinising the applications.
The default should be to say no, not yes.
And we need to smash the gangs, which, you know, the gangs are running riot, and you know, only Labour's got a plan to do that.
Well, what is that plan?
What is the plan? Yeah.
Seriously, because you said this before and you didn't answer it before, and I'm quite surprised you've come on and said it again. What is the plan, other than to say the word repeatedly, smash the
absolutely.
gangs?
The plan is the key part of the plan is the cross-border police force, which we've seen with cross-border action smashed in Germany. The German and the Belgians working together smashed the largest people smuggling gang that was based out of Germany and Belgium just a few weeks ago. So it takes effort. It takes a government that doesn't just talk about it, that does it, and that's what we need.
The whole point here, again, it comes back down to this for me, which is an issue that not enough people are talking about, which is that we clearly can't deport anyone. That we get. We can't deport these people, as we've discussed.
Yeah. Why can't we?
Yeah,
France has just deported an imam who said that the French flag is satanic.
Because the system is too soft.
How can they put him on a plane?
Exactly. But the point is, you don't need to get on a boat or come in the back of a lorry and spend that. You could book a flight from a country, and you can tell now, because this Abdul Azidi case, that if you manage to just hang around in Britain and you happen to have about £2.5 in your back pocket, you will almost definitely end up with a British passport within a few
And what's
years.
tragic in all this is that people who genuinely deserve asylum aren't getting it because the system is being clogged up and destroyed by people who shouldn't be getting it.
All right, now look, as part of their response to our FOI request, the Ministry of Justice said anyone facing a Crown Court trial is eligible for legal aid, subject to a strict means test. Depending on their means, applicants for criminal legal aid can be required to pay contributions up to the entire cost of the defence if they are convicted at least one offence with which they are charged. And a legal aid agency spokesperson said those making asylum claims do not receive a penny of legal aid money. It goes directly to lawyers to ensure a fair hearing. Now, yeah, all of that is true. I just can't help but think it misses the entire key point here, which is just it doesn't really matter because the cost is about £5,000 or £2.5 depending on whether or not you decide to commit a sex offence at any point during your situation of asylum here. The point is you're staying, right? And that's the price of a British passport. Still to come. As Prince Harry claims that he is at a greater security risk than his mother due to racism, Princess Diana's friend and former butler, Paul Burrell, hits back. But up next, Lee Anderson is being investigated for a hate crime over his remarks about Sadiq Khan. Straight question. Is this a ridiculous waste of police time? Former Met copper Norman Brennan is fired up and ready to go head-to-head with broadcaster Jenny Barnett. Don't miss a second.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News. Now, coming up, the man who Princess Diana described as her rock, Paul Burrell, reacts to Prince Harry's claims that he faces greater security risks than his late mother due to racism. But first, it's time for tonight's head-to-head. Police are assessing a report they've received against Lee Anderson for hate speech in response to his comments that Islamists had got control of Sadiq Khan. And London's mayor certainly didn't sound like he was going to let it go. This was what he said on LBC this morning.
I've had a number of emotions over the last 6 days. Sad, angry, frustrated, appalled, heartbroken. A lot of different emotions. But it's not about me. Listen,
it is a bit.
Now, if Anderson's comments were supposedly hateful, I'd like to know why the police never investigated this. Here's Labour MP Rupert Huck telling an audience that Kwasi Kwarteng is just superficially black.
Yes, black man. If you hear him on the Today programme, you wouldn't know he's black.
And where were the police when The Guardian printed this sickening cartoon mocking Priti Patel, or when the pro-Palestine mob paraded the flag of jihad through the streets of London? That's right, they wouldn't know where to be seen. So tonight, I am asking, is the Lee Anderson hate speech investigation a complete and utter waste of police time? Let me know your thoughts. Email me gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me at gbnews, and make sure you go and vote in our poll. I'll bring you those results very shortly, but first, going head-to-head on this are London retired police officer Norman Brennan and broadcaster Jenny Barnett. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Norman, I'll start with you. Is this hate speech investigation a complete and utter waste of time?
I think it may well be found out to be exactly that. It appears that the police are now used at any and every excuse of anybody in the public eye that says something that upsets somebody. It's straight to the police. I personally believe that if there's an issue here, it should be dealt with in-house within his party. I mean, Islamophobia is a dislike or a prejudice towards Muslims. I think Mr. Anderson was actually asking a question, almost a rhetorical question to a certain degree, of who Sadiq Khan actually answers to, who controls him. I mean, I've been a Londoner for 65 years. I've been a police officer in London for 31 years. And I'll be quite honest with you, I understand why millions of people are actually supporting Lee Anderson, because in all that time under Sadiq Khan, without moving too far away, I've never seen, which is relevant, so much anger, hatred, belligerence, division and revenge. Okay. So much so that I don't recognise the London I once had. And I think Lee Anderson was asking a question, and a good question, Mr. Khan, who do you actually answer to? Because it appears not to be the people in London that he meets.
OK, all right, I'll come back to you, Norman. Look, I'll go to you now, Jenny, on this. I mean, if we're going to investigate Lee Anderson for hate speech on this, and then something happens to him, right, you might as well arrest everyone in every single pub on a Friday or Saturday night in Britain.
No. No, Lee Anderson has a position of responsibility, and I hear what Mr. B is saying here, but if you are in a position of responsibility and you have several people who don't know where they're going, where they're voting, and if a man like Lee Anderson is stoking up hatred, stoking up racism, it only serves to tipple the country in the way that we're going. And Sunak, will use somebody like Lee Anderson because he wants that racist vote so that it doesn't go to the Reform or to Farage if he stands again. And I think you have to look at what Lee Anderson is.
Jenny, could I just ask on that? Sorry, because I think quickly. I think you have just dismissed millions of people in Britain now as racist. Do you not think maybe you're the problem?
No, I'm not dismissing them. I'm saying there's a whole swathe of people who listen to people like Lee Anderson, who does actually call himself a thug, and he comes out with stuff where people don't know where they're going and they want somebody to lead them. And it's like the Trump playbook, that somebody like Lee Anderson is aggressive, he knows what he wants, he sounds like he knows what he's talking about, but actually he's antisocial, he's anti-humanitarian, and he wants to make trouble. He doesn't care. I mean, all he's doing is lighting the fire. But remember that we're going into an election, and Lee Anderson is a perfect, convenient distraction.
Right, OK. I mean, if it's a distraction, it's not been a particularly good one, I think. But anyway, Norman, your views on what Jenny has had to say there, that, paraphrasing massively, but essentially the police investigation needs to take place because Lee Anderson has essentially whipped up a load of racism and what he said was racist.
But is he? Has he? Or is Lee Anderson an MP that's quite well thought of, that says it how he does? I represent policing independently, victims of crime and the public in Britain. I have done for 35 years. Sometimes you have to ask the tough questions. You have to ask the questions that millions of people want to ask. Millions of people live day in and day out with the anger and hatred, and people that have come into Britain and have reduced Britain to a certain degree to a place that many of us that have lived here all our lives no longer recognise, and some of us don't want to live. So if asking difficult questions means that you're likely to be reported by the lefties in Mr. Anderson's case, it means that nobody will ever ask the tough questions. And to be quite honest with you, the way Britain is at the moment, I think individuals in Parliament need to ask the tough questions, and it appears that if they do, or when they do, they're under investigation. Well, millions of people are supporting Lee Anderson.
Jenny, look, I'll put it to you that what you're doing is listening to something that you don't like, and you want that person arrested and charged so that you don't ever have to listen to that again.
No, I think he needs to take responsibility for what he does. He has said things like people can survive on 30p a day, talking about people using
criminal, is it? Well, no, but that's not criminal. This is my point. You just don't like him, do you?
No, it's got nothing to do with it. He's a son of a miner. My heart goes out with the son of a miner. So and there's part of me, good luck to him for how he speaks, but he is not fit to be an MP. He's not fit to be a politician because he's so out of touch. And to say what he said, Norman, you know, where, and you said it at the beginning, Islamophobia is the fear of, hatred of, or prejudice against a religious group. What is he so terrified of that he has to ask questions in that way?
I would imagine it's radical Islam.
I'll ask you this question. Let me ask you this question. What does it say if actually it went to a public vote and millions, possibly tens of millions, actually supported Mr. Anderson's concerns and views? What does that say? Or do we just stop people asking the difficult questions? Because if that's the case, Britain might as well just roll over and put its hands in the air and say we give in.
Yeah, seriously, Jenny, do we have to? The police have to waste time now investigating everybody who agrees with Lee Anderson? Is that what this is?
Lee Anderson is not an innocent man. He was suspended from the Labour Party because he used boulders to block members of the traveller community for setting up a campsite. That man is not innocent. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing, and there's millions of people out there who are disenfranchised. And I don't think that any man that lurches to the right at this time in our
Is it a police matter, Jenny? Is it a police matter? Because that's the point.
If you were Sadiq Khan, you'd think it was, wouldn't you?
I think Sadiq Khan is using London as his playground. Mr. Anderson has watched him. Hang on a sec. I've listened to you. And what he does, he sees that Sadiq Khan is using London for his own projects. And many of us that live in London are wondering who he actually represents. So what Mr. Anderson done is ask the difficult questions. And do you know what? I don't mind somebody asking a difficult question. And if he says he was clumsy, OK, he's clumsy. Put that aside. But all the distractors are now using...
Norman, presumably no police officer wants to investigate Lee Anderson for hate speech over this. Really, seriously. Oh, I think we've lost Norman. Hard to tell. Oh, he's just angry. Oh, I'll tell you what, we were about out of time anyway, so there we go. Perfect timing in a way. Right, well, that was retired police officer Norman Brennan and broadcaster Jenny Bonnet. Both of you, thank you very much for putting up, certainly, two distinct sides to that discussion. Who do you agree with? Is the Lee Anderson hate speech investigation a waste of police time? Sheila on X says... Anderson speaks the truth, and what happens? The Met decide to assess his comments while ignoring anti-Semitic placards and chants on the streets. This proves Anderson was right. Sean says, another waste of public money for Lee, only telling the truth. Pathetic. Is it not two-tier policing, everybody? Is it not? Jason says, it's called free speech, end of. Well, not that many different shades of grey in the inbox there, to be fair, but your verdict is in. 95% of you think that the Lee Anderson hate speech investigation is a waste of time. 5% of you say it isn't. Yes, exactly. You would have to throw a net over every single pub in Britain, pretty much, if you wanted to make those conversations a police matter. And it's ridiculous. Coming up, it's revealed that a staggering 1.4 million visas were dished out from the UK last year. What the hell are we doing? And actually, as well, you'll be amazed to learn how many of those people are currently unemployed, for goodness sake. It's not working, is it? But next, in his desperate bid to get taxpayer-funded security, Prince Harry said that he was at more risk than his late mother due to racism. Well, former butler to the People's Princess and her rock, Paul Burrell, says that this is low, even for Harry. He's live next. Don't move.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seemed to be a significant amount, does once again point its way to a public inquiry into exactly what happened in this case. Starmer's called for that. Would you call for that too?
I certainly think that first of all, there's one thing that's happening now. The NHS have to order an independent inquiry. That's been done. So they've got to look at all the whys and wherefores of what happened with this man. If it appears that we're not getting sufficient depth and breadth to this, then I think having an inquiry with all the powers that brings would be extremely advantageous. What I don't want is some long-winded inquiry that will take years, by which time other people will have been put at risk and maybe other lives have lost. We know what the problems are here, Camilla. Law's been passed on this. This is all about making sure on the ground we implement the highest degree of monitoring in order to ensure the safety of the public.
Has care in the community failed? I mean, it seems oxymoronic to say that it's care in the community in this case. We know that the number of psychiatric care beds has been slashed from 52,000 back in 2001 to 24,000 now. I've anecdotally, because I wrote my column about this in The Telegraph yesterday, received quite a lot of correspondence from people saying the situation with care in the community is dire. People aren't being adequately monitored. Was it a mistake to close down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them, and not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals, and you know I campaign on that a lot.
I know.
However, I think if we move into a more community-based approach, which can be really good for many, many people who are on the spectrum and on that scale of mental health, we have to remember there will be a small but significant number who will continue to pose a danger.
Okay.
And that's why monitoring is so important.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Coming up, I reveal the record-breaking rise in visas issued to foreign workers and, crucially, their families during 2023. I mean, spoiler alert, not a huge amount of them are still in work, but anyway. First, though, it's time for Princess Diana's former butler, Paul Burrell. And it has been revealed in High Court documents that Prince Harry believed he was at greater risk of being harmed than his late mother, Princess Diana. The Duke said that he was in a position that no one was willing to put my mother in 23 years ago, and yet today, with greater risk, with the additional layers of racism and extremism, someone is comfortable taking accountability for what could happen. I would like that person's name who is willing to take accountability for this choice, please, which ironically is in no way threatening, of course. The court heard how Al-Qaeda had called for Harry to be killed after he revealed his Taliban kill count in his memoir Spare. The Duke also claimed that the decision to downgrade his security was made in private without his knowledge, before the judge pointed out that he was warned in a paper provided by the royal household back in January 2020. Paul Burrell joins me now. So, Paul, do you agree that Harry faces a greater risk than Diana because of things like racism?
Patrick, honestly, doesn't this just illustrate the fact that Harry is full of his own self-importance? He has an inflated ego, and it's egotistical of him to think that he was in a greater risk than his mother was all those years ago. I stood beside Diana for 11 years. I saw firsthand what she went through. Can I just remind you that Harry chose to leave the royal family? It was his decision. I think that it's an arrogant position to think that he is so important. He wanted to leave the royal family. He discussed the terms with his late grandmother and Prince Philip and senior members of the royal family at the Sandringham summit. All of this was discussed, and to say now that this was done without his knowledge is, quite frankly, wrong. It's once again one of Harry's truths. And why should the British taxpayer foot the bill for the security of an American celebrity visiting Britain? I think, quite frankly, the British public are sick and tired of ginge and whinge and wish they would stay in America, because you know, if he stayed there, then he wouldn't have to suffer the indignity of coming to Britain. And if he didn't sue so many newspapers and outlets, maybe he'd have the money to fund his own security.
I mean, this is the thing. I mean, I'm just going to read a statement now from a spokesperson for Prince Harry, OK? So it said the Duke of Sussex will appeal his judgment, which refuses his judicial review claim against the decision-making body RAVAC, which includes the Home Office, the Royal Household and the Met Police. The Duke hopes he will obtain justice from the Court of Appeal and make no further comment while the case is ongoing. Do you think he should just knock this on the head now, then, or keep appealing?
Of course he should. How many millions is he spending on lawyers defending his corner? And quite frankly, he's not a member of the royal family. He is no longer a working member of the royal family in this country. And he doesn't deserve the security which he's had for so many years of that privileged life. He had this privileged life because he was a royal prince. His mother told him the price you pay is public service. And what public service have we seen in this country?
Well, exactly. But, Paul, look, I do put it to you that, you know, maybe there is an added layer of racism. I mean, Diana was white, OK? Meghan Markle, of course, is not. So maybe he's got a point that she's got an added threat there, do you think?
Well, once again, Patrick, can I remind you of the wedding, Harry and Meghan's wedding at Windsor Castle, and the millions of people that turned out for it? Racism was not obvious at that time. There was an outpouring of love for the both of them. If they had stayed put in the royal family, it would still be there for them. It wasn't the royal family or the British people that pressed the racist button. It was Harry and Meghan on the Oprah Winfrey Show. They pressed the button, they never reset it. And whilst Her Majesty was alive, our dear late Queen was alive, they never apologized to her for pressing that racist button. She, as head of the Commonwealth, her Commonwealth of countries, which she would say was her greatest achievement, was in fracture because of what they said. I mean, they have to have some accountability for themselves and their own actions. And it's about time that Harry lived up to that.
Well, what about the extremist side of it? I mean, he revealed his kill count in Spare, and I think I'm right in saying he referred to the Taliban and jihadis as chess pieces and things like that. And again, I think I'm right in saying the Taliban did actually hit back at that. So, you know, I suppose we talk a lot about Islamist threats on this show. Let's have it both ways in that sense. There probably are some against him.
OK, but Patrick, we all know that Harry isn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. And to discuss his kill count on a national programme, to goad the Taliban, well, you know, as Prince Philip would say, you've made your bed, you have to lie in it. And I think, you know, he has to be accountable to himself and his own actions. So, you know, we have to take it on board, don't we? The fact that Harry has gone rogue and he's no longer a member of the royal family. He's turned his back on the country. He's turned his back on the people of this country. And now he's almost an American citizen.
Can I just ask you quickly as well, Paul? I'm sorry, I genuinely hadn't planned on asking you this, but I just thought while you're here, I mean, do you think William's all right? I mean, we had that issue the other day, didn't we, about him pulling out at the last minute for personal reasons? Do you think everything's okay?
I think he's fine. I think it was a personal, private issue that he had to deal with, and it came up at the very last minute. It's unlike a royal to actually back out from a public engagement an hour before it happened. So it must have been something which affected William closely. It may have been Kate. It may have been a problem that she had. She may have needed him there at Adelaide Cottage. Whatever the reason, William isn't backing away from his public duty. He is our future king. He's a king in waiting, and all our hopes are with him and with Kate for a speedy recovery.
Thank you very, very much, Paul. All the best. You take care. That is Paul Burrell there. Now, coming up, the people of Rochdale have just minutes left to vote in one of the most bonkers by-elections that Britain has ever seen. I will go live to the count when the polls shut at 10. I've got a great 10 o'clock hour lined up for you. But next, 1.4 million visas were handed out by the Home Office last year. Should we be allowing foreign workers to bring their families with them? Alison Pearson, Mark Littlewood, Matthew Laza, they're going to thrash this one out shortly. Oh, yeah, and how many of them are still in work, by the way?
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Look, you're a respected royal biographer, and there are so many people who are on the sort of royal gravy train, if you will, people who are making a career out of gossip and speculation. But yours very much built on confidence and sources and facts. And you don't offer an opinion that often inside your book. But when you do, I suppose, therefore, it carries a bit more weight. So when you say that the Sussexes are easily offended and, you know, effectively pretty prickly, what do you mean and what have you based that on?
Well, on numerous... their riposte to any given situation in their books, in their TV interviews. And let's not forget, there have been a lot of TV interviews, 6-part Netflix drama, Spare. You see time and again that they feel that they feel resentful. They feel that, you know, something hasn't gone their way and that this is part of some sort of calculated campaign against them. And actually, I mean, when you've got a fast-moving story, I mean, for example, in my book, I go into those frantic hours after the death of the Queen, and everybody's trying to sort themselves out. And Harry writes in his book Spare how you know, no one will return his calls, and he can't get through to anyone, and it's sort of it's just all a bit me. And actually, the whole kind of royal machine, if you like, is a team effort. And I just think it's very sad because, you know, Harry and Meghan, they had such potential. And now when we do tend to hear from them, on a royal matter, it's just to say how miserable they were being royal. And that was, you know, they were royal for whatever it was, 600-700 days. They're post-royal now for over twice that time. Can you envisage a scenario where they're back in England and they're back in royal life? I can't envisage a situation where they're back, as it were, as part of the sort of royal working unit, but I could certainly see it becoming a kind of normal thing for them to keep.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. It's Patrick Christys Tonight, only on GB News. Now, the polls are about to slam shut in the Rochdale/Gaza by-election. I'll bring you everything you need to know very, very soon. Yeah, we've got a fantastic final hour of the show lined up for you. But before that, astonishing new figures have revealed that a record 1.4 million visas were handed out to foreign workers, students and their dependents last year. We brought in 146,000 foreign workers to run our health and social care. That's almost double the number issued the year before. But even more crazy stuff for you now, because there was an 80%, 80, jump in the number of migrants bringing their families. 270,000 dependents were granted a visa without any commitment to work in the UK economy. Elsewhere, a whopping 457,000 study visas were issued. The figures will pile pressure onto Rishi Sunak, who has promised to slash immigration ahead of the next general election. Well, to react to yet another betrayal of the British people, I am joined by my panel. It is Star Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, and former Labour Party advisor, Matthew Larzer. Alison, is this as big a scandal as it sounds?
It's hard to get your head around. Look, we were still reeling from the 745,000 number. Now we've got 1.4 million, of whom, Patrick, only 337,000 are work visas. So almost all of the rest are accompanying or students or whatever. Yeah, it is absolutely deeply shocking. It has to be said that the government has latterly realised that this is a complete scam, and they are now closing the door on the dependents option. But it's a bit damn late, isn't it? With all these people coming in. One thing I think that we should point out is that the reason there's a crisis in the health and social care is because the government made COVID vaccines mandatory for the care sector, and 66,000 care workers left almost overnight. There's a huge gap, and we haven't got enough. We're going to have to increase the wages to get British people to start doing those jobs.
I'm just going to rattle off a couple of stats. I'll go to you, Mark, here. So health and care visas have gone up 91%, right? Dependents, they're up 80%. We've got study visas up 70%. Graduate route extensions up 57%, family visas up 72%. We, the taxpayers, are paying billions of pounds a year for people to come to Britain and not bloody work, aren't we?
Fair point, well made, Patrick. I mean, here's the problem, just to parcel it out there, right? I mean, my policy would be something like this. This is a rather rudimentary way of looking at it, but if you take all of government expenditure and you divide it between the total number of people in the UK, It's £14,000 per person per year. Now, obviously, it will differ a lot if you're sick and getting a lot of treatment, or you're a kid in school or something, it's higher, and if you're not dependent on those things, it's lower. But rough and ready number, you want to bring a dependent, it's £14,000 a year.
Brilliant.
Is the cost in cash up front, 1st of January every year. That's the likely cost of your dependent. We might change it a bit to make children more expensive because they're going through the education system, or elderly relatives more expensive because they're going through the healthcare system. But there should be a fee for it. It should not be automatic. That's the way the government should. Basically, if you price it, we've got a much better solution. Here's the other point, to pick up on Alison saying that people have left the care sector. I don't dissent from that. But there are 5 million Brits of working age on the sick, as we used to say, right? They've got. I mean, I don't know whether. I mean, this epidemic of depression seems to be considerably worse than the epidemic of COVID, from what I can judge. So our welfare system is not driving enough Brits, the indigenous population, into work. We've got to get a bit tougher on our welfare system, and then actually the demand for so many migrants would fall.
Yeah, would you go with that?
Well, I mean, we've had look, I know you're going to or mock me for saying it, but this is a testament
we've had 14 years
of failure. Because let me just say that the net legal migration under this Conservative government is higher than it has ever been under a Labour government, and this is one of the unintended consequences of leaving the EU. I bet you I'm the only person here who voted Remain. Mark and I used to campaign together to stay in Europe. That's a long time ago.
Can I just push back on that slightly? The rapid rate of demographic change is one of the unintended and totally unnecessary, by the consequence, leaving the EU. The numbers game.
Well, the numbers is because what happens is, of course, most people from the EU didn't bring dependents. The percentage of people who brought dependents is much lower. A lot of young people came for 2 or 3 years. So, of course, a small minority stayed, but a lot of people went home. So free movement was
European citizens can still apply for these visas.
Yes, but they're not. If you look, they're not European citizens. They're not the ones who are getting them. They're getting them further. Right. So if you're asking somebody, if you're asking a nurse from Portugal to come, okay, a 25-year-old nurse from Portugal might want to come and live in London or Manchester or Glasgow for 3 years, then they would go home. If you're asking somebody to uproot themselves from the other side of the world, from Nigeria or from South America, they're going to want to bring dependents, which is forcing numbers up.
Just put a price on it then.
Well, on the point about British workers, absolutely we need to support people into work. Welfare to work was one of the key priorities of the last Labour government. It absolutely drove it. But after the Tories forgot about it because austerity was more important. It was short-sighted austerity meant we cut the welfare to work programmes, and then we've ended up having to import people to do the jobs that we need.
One reason the Conservative government is heading for absolute extinction, in my view, is they've just given 1.4 million visas out. We are short 4 million houses, OK?
Yes.
People my kids' age, they're in their 20s, they're paying extortionate rates, absolutely extortionate rates. They couldn't begin to save anything. I'm probably not going to have any grandchildren. This is where we are, Patrick. We are discriminating against our own people. We need British people first. It's absolutely outrageous how they can admit 1.5 million people when we haven't got enough houses for our own young people or our own population.
We're not going to have enough hotels before long. What's the hotel bill every day?
Well, come on, though. You know, you're the director of the Popular Conservatives now. You know, it is the Conservatives that allowed this to happen. Everyone was crying about this for so long, and it's happened, hasn't it?
It has absolutely happened.
It didn't happen under the Labour government.
I think you would have.
Tony
you would
Blair's
have
got a lot to
faced the
answer
same pressures had Labour been in
Come on,
power.
Mark, they did this to artificially inflate GDP to look like they had a lot of money, and they didn't count what each family, what you're just saying, the people come in, they use the services, they use
and they had choices after Brexit, and they put in place a system that's disastrous.
I'm not here to defend Rishi Sunak. I've told you what my solution would be, is there's a membership fee for joining the United Kingdom. And if you impose that membership fee, I don't know how many of these 1.4 million people will sign the cheque.
On social care, I mean, Alison is absolutely right. We need as a country, need to sort out social care. David Cameron commissioned a report on how to sort social care out from a guy called Andrew Dilnot. Came up with a conclusion. It's sitting with a not 6 inches, but 6 metres of dust on a shelf. Marked too tough to handle in number 2.
It also turned out a load of people were working in care homes that didn't exist as well. So we've got you've got a con on top of a giant con.
And the other thing they've done is 7,500 is the cap for training doctors in our country every year. It's absolutely ludicrous. So many of our talented young people want to become medics, and they import them.
Because they cut places. In austerity, they cut places in medical school, and it's an absolute false economy. You need to invest.
I think most people will agree that almost no matter what Rishi Sunak or James Cleverly or whatever says, now. The fact is that these figures keep on coming, and even if they make some kind of concession now, why should anyone believe them?
Exactly. The Tories have had their chance and
why should anyone believe Labour either, by the way? Because
because migration was lower under Labour.
But you might see. I mean, I don't hold out any confidence for this. You might see the trajectory changes. So the numbers are not going to collapse to zero or anything like that. But if
the clock is ticking, Mark.
It is ticking. I don't think that will happen. But that's their act.
My clock is ticking as well, because we do not want to miss the start of this next hour. We are now 4.5 minutes away from the polls slamming shut in Rochdale. I think we can all agree this has been one of the most nuts by-elections in British political history, and because of a variety of different rules, we've not really been allowed to talk about it until in a few seconds' time. We will cross live to the count. We're going to break down one of the most dramatic and controversial by-elections in British history. It's Rochdale or Gaza.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, Alex Burgill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. After a wet day in the southeast, that rain is going to clear away, and that will lead to a touch of frost in some places before a swathe of more heavy, persistent rain pushes into parts of the southwest through the early hours in association with a system that's currently feeding its way in from the Atlantic. Ahead of that, and like I said, there will be some clear skies allowing for some frost to develop, and we also need to watch out for some patches of fog and freezing fog first thing on Friday morning, and temperatures for many likely to drop close to, if not below freezing in a few prone rural spots. The most unsettled weather tomorrow morning will be across parts of the southwest and into Wales. Heavy rain here and also some snow over modest higher ground, likely to cause some disruption, particularly to travel. Also a little bit of flooding possible as well. That rain then feeds further north and eastwards, lying across northern parts of England as we head into the afternoon. A scattering of showers with some sunny spells developing across much of England and Wales. The best sunshine there across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures for many a little on the chilly side, especially when you consider tomorrow is the first day of meteorological spring. As we look towards Saturday, and it's a bit of a messy day, there will be some outbreaks of showery rain around, and there could still be some winteriness, particularly over any modest higher ground. At the moment, it looks like Sunday is going to be a drier day for many of us, but do watch out for some rain in the southeast and more wet weather to come as we go into the start of next week, particularly on Monday. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake,
basic-
civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
Yeah.
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, voting has now closed in the bonkers Rochdale by-election. Will George Galloway win?
How are you going to answer your children, your grandchildren? How are you going to answer on the Judgment Day?
Will reform swoop in?
Simon, I can't speak. Simon, you don't let me speak. Simon, it's a simple question.
Their candidate Simon Danchuk joins me live shortly. And what about the now-ditched Labour candidate?
They allowed that massacre, and that gives them the green light to do whatever they bloody want.
We are doing a complete number on one of the maddest by-elections ever. It's turned into a choice between Rochdale or Gaza. And here to do it all are the Star Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, director of Popular Conservatives Mark Littlewood, and the ex-Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza. Oh, and talking of Gaza, we're going to be all over this Rochdale by-election. We're going live to the count in a second. We've got some of the candidates. We've got it all going on. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. OK, well, look, make sure that you stay tuned here for us on GB News, because I can finally reveal all of the absolutely insane stuff that has been going on in Rochdale, and that is next.
So the top story from the GB Newsroom tonight is that the polls have now just closed to voters in Rochdale in Greater Manchester who've been casting their ballots in the local by-election there. Let's show you live pictures, if we can, of what's going on in Rochdale. Perhaps not just yet, but we will tell you that the vote will decide who'll replace the veteran Labour MP Sir Tony Lloyd, who died in January. There were 11 candidates on the ballot paper for voters to choose from today. Those results expected in full tomorrow morning, and there'll be full coverage and analysis right through the night here on GB News. Well, the other main news today, the Home Secretary says police officers will be automatically suspended if they're charged with certain criminal offences. The comments came after the Sarah Everard inquiry found Wayne Couzens should never have been a police officer. Couzens killed Sarah Everard in 2021. Her family says she died because she would never have got into a stranger's car if he hadn't been a police officer. Speaking in the Commons today, James Cleverly said public confidence in the police needs rebuilding, adding that anyone who's not fit to wear the uniform must be removed from policing. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said the inquiry described Mr Cleverly's response was too weak, too little and too late. The Prince of Wales has condemned a rise in anti-Semitism during a visit to a Jewish synagogue. Prince William said it had no place in society as he met young people and students in London. He was told about an increase in anti-Semitism since the Israel-Hamas war. It was his first public appearance as well since pulling out of a memorial service last Tuesday due to a personal matter. Fines for parents taking children out of school without permission will rise across England from September. It's part of new efforts to boost school attendance following the pandemic. The minimum fine will increase from £60 to £80 a parent. And if they fail to pay their fine within 21 days, it'll double. That comes after nearly 400,000 penalties were issued in 2022 for unauthorised school absences, which were higher than pre-COVID. And lastly, tributes have been paid to TV chef and hairy bikers star Dave Myers, who's died at the age of 66, less than 2 years after revealing his cancer diagnosis. His widow, Liliana, has described him as a wonderful, brave husband. And celebrity chefs James Martin and Paul Hollywood have posted touching tributes online, with Nigella Lawson also saying she was heavy-hearted hearing the news. His motorcycling cooking partner, Cy King, said Dave had passed away peacefully at home with his family, adding that everyone who loved Dave was now devastated. That's the news. For the very latest stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on the screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, the polls have now slammed shut in the third by-election in February alone as the countdown to the general election gathers pace. And it's safe to say that Rochdale is one of the most controversial and crucial by-elections in recent memory. There it is there on your map towards the middle of the country, the northwest. Anyway, many in the Lancashire town near Manchester feel neglected and frustrated at all the bad press the town has received in recent years following the grooming gang scandal. Now, they, like much of Britain, want a reason for hope. And the town's constituents are about to elect a new MP following the sad death of the widely respected Labour MP, Sir Tony Lloyd, who died in service earlier this year at the age of 73. He spent the final stint of his 36-year career as an MP representing Rochdale following the 2017 election. Lloyd was knighted in the 2021 birthday honours for public service. Now, Labour should have been set for a February clean sweep, shouldn't they? Aiming to hold a seat that they won with a majority of 51.6% at the 2019 general election. Just look at some of these numbers here. But after disowning candidate Azhar Ali, and of course the entry into the race of maverick former MP and left-wing firebrand George Galloway, the contest is now wide open. Galloway's main competition, though, may come from fellow former Labour man Simon Danczuk, who is now standing for Reform UK. The Tories have been quietly going about their business, I think very quietly, it must be said, and hope that local volunteer Paul Ellison can capitalise on a potential split vote. The Green Party, well, they've also abandoned their candidate Guy Otten, apparently, and have lent their support to independent Mark Coleman. I told you it was a bit mad, didn't I? The Rochdale residents' frustration has resulted in a rise in independent parties, with two local businessmen, David Tully and Michael Howarth, feeling compelled to stand. George Galloway says his victory could shake the walls of Parliament. But for the residents in Rochdale, they will be hoping the huge divisions created during a fiery and fraught and controversial campaign can be mended first. You'll find out who wins here first on GB News. We are Britain's election channel. And to get the latest on the ground in Rochdale now, shall we take you there? I certainly think we should. I'm joined by our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who's got a long night ahead. Catherine's at the count. What's going on?
Yes, good evening, Patrick, and welcome to what promises to be a quite extraordinary night here in Rochdale. You can see behind me a hive of activity. All the people here now verifying the vote. The polls closed, of course, just a few minutes ago. Those boxes have been brought here from all the different wards you can see arranged around the room. We've got dozens of people here. They're armed with crisps, they're armed with chocolate, they're armed with water for a long night. The verification process expected to take about an hour. But my goodness, we've had a lot of by-elections, haven't we? They've come around very regularly. What tends to happen is that they go from the Conservatives to either Labour or the Lib Dems. But of course, that's not going to happen here. First of all, this was a Labour seat. It was the sad death of Sir Tony Lloyd, very well respected here. He only passed away on the 17th of January. This by-election was arranged very fast because Labour wanted to, quote, ensure a vacuum isn't created for George Galloway and his circus of division to walk into. But unfortunately for the Labour Party, that is precisely what has happened, because the chap that they chose, Azhar Ali, local councillor, they had to boot out of the party for anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, having supported him initially. Then they realised that he was beyond the pale. So there is no Labour candidate here in what should be a safe Labour seat. The Conservative guy was on holiday. They know they don't have a hope. The Lib Dems used to hold this seat. They've got no real hope either. The people that are seriously fighting this are Simon Danczuk from the Reform Party. He, of course, was here for many years, but also George Galloway. And they are feeling, as his spokesman told me a little bit earlier, not quietly confident, but loudly confident.
Wow, OK. Well, you have set this up perfectly for us at the top of the hour, Catherine. Thank you very, very much. And make sure that you keep your eyes On GB News is, of course, if you're listening on radio, you're going to be hearing a lot more from Catherine Forster at that by-election count. Tom Harwood will be with you 12 until 6 a.m. So we will give you the results first. But look, finally, we are allowed to talk on national television about the Rochdale by-election tale of the tape. So Labour refused to back an immediate ceasefire. That led to scenes like this, where Labour candidate Azhar Ali started getting abused and turfed out of restaurants.
Murderers, that's what you are. Listen to me. No, you're wrong. Say maybe won't listen. Here, free Palestine, free Palestine. Not in the beat.
Allahu Akbar. That's right. Walk out, you little prick. Go on, walk out, you little prick.
Lovely bunch of lads. Then he was caught on tape saying this.
They deliberately, I believe that, and I've said it publicly, they deliberately took the security off. Yeah. They allowed the massacre, and it was a massacre of 1,200 innocent people, right? They allowed that massacre, and that gives them the green light to do whatever they bloody want.
Right, so then Keir Starmer binned Ali, but not before the campaigning leaflets had already been ordered and then rather embarrassingly delivered. After Starmer ditched Ali, Ali then made his own campaign leaflets, which look like this. Just keep them on the screen for me. Rochdale decides. A picture of Keir Starmer as a clown. Anti-Palestine Starmer. A strong voice for Palestine. Yeah, there we go. Sacked by Starmer for speaking on Palestine. It's time to teach Starmer a lesson. OK. Well, into the void steps George Galloway.
And I just want, in closing, to ask you this. How are you going to answer your children, your grandchildren? How are you going to answer on the Judgment Day?
Right. If George Galloway wins, it would be the 5th constituency he's represented as an MP. That would put him on a par with Sir Winston Churchill. He's been putting out campaign literature like this, OK? And we're going to talk about this in more detail a little bit later on. But essentially, he wants to say a big assalamu alaikum to the people of Rochdale. He obviously feels so comfortable, the people don't mind dropping the P word a few times either.
Cashier. Only one of us was a but we were all
yeah. The former Labour MP for Rochdale is now the Reform Party candidate. That's Simon Danchuk, and he's had a right time of it.
Simon, I can't speak. Simon, you don't let me speak. Simon, it's a simple. No, it's a simple question because I'm going to go if I can't speak. If I'm not on the top table speaking to the people of Rochdale, I'm going to leave.
Simon Danchuk joins me in a minute, by the way. But look, here we are. The voting has closed, the polls have closed, and the bookies have it like this. The latest odds, according to Oddschecker, are Labour 8 to 11 on. George Galloway and his Workers' Party of Britain are close behind, 11 to 10. Reform are 40 to 1. The Liberal Democrats are 50 to 1, and the Conservatives are 100 to 1. It's a brave man that puts a tenner on them, isn't it? So, there are the runners and the riders. But how are the candidates feeling? Standing for Reform UK in Rochdale is the aforementioned former Labour MP, now Reform candidate. It is Simon Danchuk. Simon, are you feeling confident?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. It's now time to find out, isn't it? And I think it's really close. I think it's very difficult to call. It's sort of a four-way fight in many ways. So we'll see what it turns out like later today.
Yeah, OK. Now, this, as far as I could tell, became a by-election where voters were given a choice between Rochdale and Gaza. And arguably, it's quite concerning if they decide to vote for Gaza, isn't it?
Well, that's exactly how Galloway tried to frame this election. It's the most extremist election I've known in my 35 years in British politics. There's been intimidation, there's been threats to members of the public who are supporting particular people, intimidation around polling stations. There's been a dramatic increase in people signing up to vote by post. So there's been a really unusual sort of approach to democracy in this by-election. There's no doubt about that. And I think in the aftermath, we have to ask questions about how democracy is working in by-elections like this. But you're exactly right. Galloway's come in, the Galloway circus has come into town. He's tried to appeal to a very vocal minority in the town in the hope that he will just scrape through and the large silent majority will splinter all over the place, and then he will have a chance to become the MP on the back of Gaza. He's very much exploiting the Middle East situation in the hope that he can become the MP for Rochdale. That's the reality of it.
You've mentioned that there's been quite an extremist undertone to this particular by-election. We played a clip a bit earlier on there of you getting, well, turfed out, essentially, or leaving of your own accord, but not particularly welcome anyway, hustings, for example. Dirty tricks in this by-election, do you think?
Oh, plenty of them, without doubt, and you illustrate it with that example. This was supposed to be a hustings so that the people of Rochdale could decide on who they might want to vote for in this by-election. But the panel consisted of George Galloway and a very weak Liberal Democrat candidate. They refused to put me on the panel for no reason whatsoever, except that I would have given Galloway a good run for his money. So plenty of dirty tricks in this campaign. I've experienced many of them. People who've been supporting me have been intimidated by Galloway goons. There's no doubt about that. This is not how we should be carrying out democracy in Britain in the 21st century. There are real questions to be asked, actually.
Without going into anything specific that may or may not involve any kind of active proceedings or anything, you mentioned some other examples there about some of your supporters allegedly being intimidated by goons. Would you mind just expanding on that, please?
Yeah, so one or two businesses that decided to endorse me, which isn't unusual in an election campaign, have found themselves being intimidated, sent violent and aggressive messages to the point where they've had to, pull back from actually endorsing me. I mean, it's absolutely appalling behaviour, but I'm not surprised by it. This is clearly being done by supporters of Galloway. There's no doubt about that. He's come into town and he's created division. I met a senior councillor a week or so ago, doesn't support me, but he'd been campaigning for another candidate in this by-election, and he said when we went into one particular area, people were throwing stones at us. That's the sort of division that's been created by Galloway's circus in Rochdale.
Well, obviously, it's vitally important to say that George Galloway is not here to defend himself. The offer is open to George Galloway and has been made, by the way. No doubt he would deny some of those allegations. Well, look, Simon, take care, and we will find out in a few hours, won't we, I suppose, whether or not you have indeed swept to victory. Right, well, look, let's get analysis now from my top panellists. Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson is director at the Popular Conservatives. It is the wonderful Mark Littlewood and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Alison, freedom is ours. We can talk about the complete and utter nuttery now about the Rochdale by-election. Huzzah! This has been bonkers, hasn't it?
It's like wacky races, isn't it, really? They're all on the starter grid. It's Dick Dastardly, George Galloway coming up on the outside. Yeah, it's completely mental. I mean, you've got on this ballot paper, you've got two candidates standing for parties that have now disowned them, and I think you could have quite a few people voting for Azhar Ali who think he's the Labour candidate. So if Labour wins, or he won't, well, he'll be the independent, won't he, really? And I particularly like the fact that the Conservative candidate went on holiday, which is a sort of, a declaration of intent. I've got a bit of a sort of a sneaking sort of feeling that Danzuk, who you just interviewed, could possibly do quite well, because you've now got the Muslim vote. The town is about 30% Muslims. You've got the Muslim vote possibly split between Galloway and Azhar Ali, who was the former Labour candidate, and it could be that Simon Danzuk could come through quite well. You think of Reform as being on the right, but Simon has been campaigning as old Labour. He was a Labour MP. So it's very, very open, I think.
Yeah, well, we're going to be taking you live to the count throughout all of this. I will just go to you first, Matthew, because the Labour story here is incredibly relevant. Azhar Ali said some really fruity things. Really fruity things. Starmer then biffed him, but not before the campaign literature had come out. Then Azhar Ali did the old reverse ferret and now decides he hates Starmer. What happens if he wins? Does Starmer have him back?
No, absolutely not. Labour's been couldn't be clearer. If he wins tonight, then he'll be an independent MP, hopefully for just a few months. Rochdale deserves a lot better than the farce there is there tonight. Rochdale's a great town. It's got its problems, but it's got a huge heart. I know it well. And what it needs is a decent Labour candidate, and Labour will make sure that it has a proper candidate at the next election, a candidate worthy of the town.
OK, just before I go to you, Mark, just before I go to you, I'm just hearing now that I think we can hear from Stephen Kinnock, I think, the Labour MP. Let's hear it.
Well, to be frank, I'm pleased that this whole sorry saga has come to an end now. It has been a very difficult and messy process. I'm very pleased that we took rapid and robust action in terms of our candidate, and the #1 priority for us now in Rochdale will be to select a strong candidate who will take the seat for Labour, and we will have a Labour MP at the general election that we can be proud of.
OK, all right. Mark, the Conservative candidate, went on holiday.
Yeah. Wisely, I would suggest, in these circumstances. Right?
Did he go to Gaza on holiday?
Here's the only thing, Patrick, that could have made it even madder. And I'm a bit disappointed they didn't do this. The Labour Party should have then endorsed one of the other candidates, some local independent, and then you could have had somebody actually winning this by
there's the vicar
on about
standing.
12% of the vote or something.
There's a vicar standing who's been to jail for Just Stop Oil.
Okay.
And there were two people with the same surname.
OK.
It's crazy.
Now, just before, I'm going to go to Anne Widdecombe, actually, who is former Cabinet Minister, of course. Anne, thank you very, very much. Look, have you ever seen a by-election quite as nutty as this?
No, I mean, it's been vastly entertaining, but of course, it is a very serious matter, and somebody has got to represent that seat until the general election. And it has been. I mean, it's been an absolute comedy and a circus, and I'm sure we've all enjoyed it, but actually that doesn't really do justice to the seriousness of the issues.
Yeah, and I think arguably the most serious one is that this is a bit of a bellwether for things that a lot of seats are going to see at the next general election, where they are being asked to choose, seriously, between what is the main issue for them here, in whatever seat you're in, and how much you care about Gaza. And how do you see this going?
Well, I mean, there have been elections before which have been dominated by foreign affairs, but that has always been when Britain's got boots on the ground. And so there's an immediate UK interest. One thinks of the Iraq War, for example. But this time round, for a foreign event to completely dominate a by-election, when I assume that Rochdale's got big problems, like everybody else. It will have housing problems. It will have infrastructure problems. And yet all the conversation appears to have been about Gaza.
Does this spell disaster for the country, really? I mean, what does this say? You know, we've got an election here, a by-election, completely dominated by a foreign policy issue, a war that we are not involved in, really, and here we are. You know, here we are. This is what's dominating it, and is whipping up a load of hatred and all of that, and we've got people who clearly, a large chunk of people do not really care that much about what's going on in their own country. They don't feel like it's their own country, do they?
Well, I do think that probably most people in Rochdale do care a bit about what goes on in Rochdale, but they haven't really heard a lot about that. There is a very large interest group there, being led by George Galloway, but there's a very large interest group there that is seriously concerned about what is happening in Gaza, when in fact this election should be about what is happening either in Rochdale or in the UK as a whole, given that by-elections are often bellwethers for how people view the government. And I think we know how they view the government because the candidate went off on holiday.
Yeah, and you've led me perfectly on to my next question, which is the Tories lost in Kingswood and Wellingborough 2 weeks ago. And then we have the vote in Rochdale tonight. Now, obviously, this was a Labour seat, OK, so it's not like they're going to necessarily lose it or anything. But what can we learn about how the general election is shaping up from these by-elections so far, do you think, Em?
Well, the mere fact that the candidate went on holiday says it all. It says the Conservatives have given up. They're not serious about the next general election. I have to say, regrettably, because for 55 years it was my party, but I have to say that I think they thoroughly deserve it. I mean, they have made an unholy mess with a huge majority. They've made a consistent mess. I mean, one or two things going wrong, everybody expects that. But no matter who the Prime Minister's been, they've made a complete mess of it. And today we hear we've got record lawful immigration.
Yeah, well, no, indeed. Well, look, Anne, thank you very, very much for picking through the noise on an incredibly chaotic by-election. Here we are now. That is Anne Widdecombe. Just a reminder for you, Tom Harwood will be here, locked in this very studio, literally locked in. We don't let him leave. Midnight until 6 o'clock in the morning, delivering you the latest news on what has been just the most insane by-election. But crucially, though, once you get through the nuttery of it, actually really important for the state of Britain. Very quick sweepstake now. Who's going to win, Alison?
Simon Danjuk, narrowly.
You're going Simon Danjuk narrowly?
No, the Labour, non-Labour candidate, I think, will get through, just because he's still got the Labour emblem on the ballot paper, and in normal circumstances, Labour would have won this with a landslide. I think he'll probably just get over the line against Galloway.
I mean, it's anybody's to play for, but I think Galloway may just do it, but I think Simon Danjuk will do better than people think.
Wow, so this is where we are, isn't it? No one knows. No one's got any.
I mean, because normally you've got people, watching the ballots being unpacked from the main for the Labour Party. I'd be getting messages, and instead everybody at Labour HQ has gone to bed.
And good luck to Tom Harwood trying to work out what it means for the national picture. I mean, that's hard. That's hard enough in a normal by-election, let alone something as wacko as this one.
I think it's frightening, though, Patrick, because we are seeing tribalism now starting to affect
This is sectarian.
This is sectarian. Most people, Rochdale is one of the highest areas of deprivation in the country. It's got a huge drug problem, crack, lots of single parents wondering how they can pay the gas bill.
The grooming scandal.
The grooming scandal. They probably think Gaza and Gaza, they probably thought he played football for England. You know, they don't know about it. And
they can't influence it.
And they can't influence it, and yet this is dominating our
Rochdale
politics.
deserves a lot better than it's getting tonight.
We will return to this. Coming up next, my panel are here for an incredibly lively, entertaining and definitely unfiltered pay-per-view, because I've got all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages for you. Plus, Keir Starmer says he has absolute confidence in Angela Rayner over the Council House row. Well, frankly, that sounds like the kiss of death, doesn't it? It's a massive story that we, unlike the rest of the media, are refusing to ignore. Stay tuned.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yep.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offender behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time now to bring you tomorrow's news. Tonight, in the liveliest pay-per-view you will get anywhere on telly. Let's do it. OK, first front page here is the Metro. Hairy biker Dave Myers dies, sadly. Goodbye, my old pal. We're also going to go to the Eye now. 2p tax cut in doubt after gloomier forecast on UK economy. I mean, yeah, obviously, anyone could have seen this coming. Just don't believe anything you read about a tax cut. OK. Daily Express. This can't go on. 1.4 million granted UK visas last year. We've spoken about this quite a lot on this show. Suella Braverman has warned that the current immigration levels cannot go on, or Britain will, quotes, become unrecognisable. Let's go to the Guardian, the Telegraph now. There we go, I skipped ahead. Russia flooding the West with migrants. Putin tries to destabilise Europe by using militias in Africa to control the flow of people. This is a big story. We're going to return to this in just a second. Let's just get you the Guardian now, which is more than 100 Palestinians die in chaos surrounding Gaza aid convoy. Obviously, a very gripping picture there on the front. There's also that story about the Rwanda scheme to cost £1.8 million for each deportee, and the Sarah Everard killer should never have joined police. OK, all right, so let's zoom in on the Telegraph, I think, now. So, apparently, Russia is using private militias to control and weaponise immigration into Europe, with growing fears that Putin is looking to destabilise a continent. So this is according to a security source. This has just landed, by the way, on the front of the Telegraph. It says, if you can control the migrant routes into Europe, then you can effectively control elections because you can restrict or flood a certain area with migrants in order to influence public opinion at a crucial time. I am joined, of course, by my panel. Alison, what do you think about this?
Well, it feeds right back into Rochdale, doesn't it? Because if Russia is using migrants, as the Telegraph story reports, to flood into certain areas, say in the UK, then you can influence. We've seen, haven't we, that this is what's happening, and it's extremely worrying. It's extremely worrying if they're going to use it as a weapon, and we're seeing that all across Europe now. And a lot other European countries are pushing back a lot more than we are, and I think we absolutely have to do that now.
Well, I mean, there was big concerns earlier on when we had that big explosion in numbers in Lampedusa, Mark, and people were saying, well, these Africans are coming with the aid of the Russian Wagner forces helping them through. And to be honest with you, you can see it, can't you? I mean, are we just being played for absolute mugs here?
Well, we are absolute mugs, aren't we? It's not difficult to play us for absolute mugs. I mean, I don't think you need to be a military tactical genius to pull off this plan that Putin's got. You just need a credit card with a sort of, you know, few tens of thousands of pounds on it. You should be able to get quite a lot of people in.
Absolutely.
Very easy to do.
And does this not smash Labour's smash the gang thing? Because actually what Labour would need to do is smash the Russians.
Well, no, absolutely it doesn't, because what Labour's plan is to have a cross-border police force and to work with our European colleagues constructively. That's what we need to do, because otherwise Putin's going to play us like a fiddle. So we need to work together and not have this great reluctance to actually work at a European level to smash the problem. All
right, so that was the latest from the front of the Telegraph. I'm just going to bring you a bit of breaking news now. So this is breaking right now. Kensington Palace has released a statement on Kate Middleton's health after being out of the public eye for 2 months following scheduled abdominal surgery. A palace spokesperson said Kensington Palace made it clear in January the timelines of the princess's recovery, and we'd only be providing significant updates. That guidance stands. Let me just read that statement for you one more time. It is just breaking now. Kensington Palace releasing a statement in relation to Kate Middleton's health after being out of the public eye for 2 months following that abdominal surgery. A palace spokesperson has said Kensington Palace made it clear in January the timelines of the princess's recovery, and we'd only be providing significant updates. The guidance stands, essentially telling everybody to stop speculating. Why they're doing that? Because there has been absolutely massive speculation on social media and, frankly, in a lot of people's homes as well. I would, politely suggest as well that actually it is looking like the timeline of her recovery might be quite a bit longer than expected, which, does set tongues wagging, doesn't it? But On to Sir Keir Starmer, because he's come out swinging for Angela Rayner over the council house row. Rayner stands accused of providing false information about her living circumstances and failing to pay the correct amount of tax when selling her former council house. But a spokesman for Starmer has said that he has absolute confidence in his deputy. However, the spokesman declined to say whether the matter was closed and if the pair had spoken about it, referring all further questions to her office. Of course, unfortunately, yesterday her office then referred all further questions to the Labour Party, and the Labour Party referred them back again, and we haven't heard anything since. Look, Mark, I'll start with you on this, because you're a football fan. When the manager gets the backing of the board, mate, they normally get sacked.
The last thing you want to hear is that the board have full confidence in you. If you're a football manager, you're dead in days, right? Look, I mean, it's Starmer's gift to sack Angela Rayner, right? Because she's elected by the membership of the party, and this is a complicated tax issue.
Yeah.
The awkward thing for Starmer is he said, on the one hand, I've got full and total confidence in her. On the other hand, I don't actually know whether she's paid the tax that she owed. If she has not paid the tax she owed, then it will be impossible for Starmer to retain full confidence in her. Then, were she, and stepping 2 steps forward here, were she to actually resign as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, we would have a leadership election for Deputy Leader of the Labour Party that would make the Rochdale by-election look normal, right? So Starmer might consider Rayner a bit of an inside enemy. Matthew can speak to that. But he probably doesn't want a deputy leadership election this close to a general election.
OK, so, Matthew...
I suspect there wouldn't be one. I suspect there'd just be one candidate.
Well, Matthew, the Speaker, it is looking increasingly like, was lent on by Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer has got himself in hot water by denying that, only for Chris Bryant to come out on the media and basically suggest that that is exactly what happened. Sue Gray is banging trouble over allegedly making staff cry and cocking up the Citizens' Assembly thing. And now Angela Rayner has absolutely massive questions to answer that could, emphasis on the word could, result in a police investigation and potential prison. Is your party as bent as an iron bob now?
Absolutely not. I mean, nice try, Patrick, but that, you know, trying to build up a catalogue of horrors.
Not building it, you did it yourself.
No, absolutely not. I mean, you know, Chris Bryant didn't say the pressure had been put on the Speaker. He said that Labour wanted to delay the debate so that they could have conversations with the Speaker. That's completely different to what the Tories have accused. And look, I think this is a storm in a teacup about Angela, and I think that it's all the questions
smash
will
the
be
gangs.
answered.
I mean, that guy, there's a gang, is there not a gang of crooks sitting there?
Of course, it's not a gang of
opposition
crooks.
benches.
Well, it's of course not a gang of crooks on opposition benches. It's a top team. I mean,
you are confident she's paid her tax bill, then? Well, Keir Starmer isn't, but you are.
Well, as far as... look, I mean, the question has been asked whether that was her... She's only got a tax liability arising if that wasn't her main place of residence, and she, I believe, has made clear that was her main place of residence.
The neighbours have questioned that.
I mean, look, what this is about, this is about a Tory peer and Tory donor who's paid researchers to go and knock on neighbours' doors and work out how many nights she spent with her husband, who had a separate house because he had a 15-year-old kid, and a lot of people have separate houses now. It's...
Most people can't afford a house. People have separate houses.
It's very modern. Have a look at Helena Bonham Carter.
Very modern.
Trends are modern.
Nice try. I disagree with Matthew profoundly, is I think what went on in Parliament when the Labour Party was under pressure and leaning on Lindsay Hoyle to change that amendment.
There's no evidence for it. I think Lindsay made a mistake of his own account.
Lindsay said that MPs were under threats. That was one of the most infamous episodes in recent parliamentary history.
I agree with you, but I don't think you needed Keir Starmer to do that.
And that shows how, in hoc, Labour is in the pockets of some of these Islamists, and that's really worrying. I think Angela is the John Prescott to Tony Blair was what Angela is.
Yeah, but
to
John
Keir.
Prescott and Tony Blair liked each other.
Yeah, but she's a bit of the authentic.
She's a voice that you need. British politics would be the lesser if she wasn't there. Having the voice of Angela Rayner with her life experience is really important.
She called me and Mark Tory scum. Tory scum. Am I scum, Matthew?
No, that's not language I would use.
No, good.
But I have knocked on doors with Angela Rayner in Stockport near both her addresses.
Did you knock on her own? Yeah. Yeah, a whole row of them. A different relative. Different relative in each one. I've got to read a writer's reply from Angela Rayner.
Quite right.
She said, regarding the matter... I owned my own home, I lived there, I paid the bills and was registered to vote there prior to selling the house in 2015, adding She was not liable for capital gains tax because it was my home and the only one I owned. My husband already owned his own home independently. Angela Rayner doing her best to put this to bed. I would politely suggest that if the media went after the current state of the Labour Party with anything like the gusto they went after Boris Johnson...
She's absolutely right.
You could, at the moment... This is a weakness, by the way, I'm saying this, as much of a weakness of Rishi Sunak as anybody else. He will never get a better chance in an election year of the Labour Speaker, the Labour leader, the Labour Deputy Leader and the Labour Chief of Staff lying down with their bellies up in the air. Oh. And what's he waiting for? A kiss? Does he want to be a gentle nudge towards them? If you care, go and finish them off. But anyway, coming up, Jacob Rees-Mogg's 16-year-old son has come to blows with disgraced former Health Secretary Matt Hancock. Yeah, I will read that again. Jacob Rees-Mogg's 16-year-old son has come to blows with disgraced former Health Secretary Matt Hancock. Wait until you hear the young man's brutal takedown when I crown tonight's greatest Britain Union jackass. But up next, I have got a few more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages for you. And with the pro-Palestine marches at fever pitch, Rishi Sunak told police chiefs to fight back against mob rule. But does he need to go way further and ban these protests? Well, we've got all of that and much, much more coming your way in just a tick. It's Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain,
but it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means 1 year you spend £100, and the next year you spend maybe £101, as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase, and that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
All right, it's Patrick Christys tonight on GB News. It's time to go to the liveliest paper review. I've got more front pages for you now. Let's do it. Daily Mail, Britain's broken borders. Watchdog reports expose shocking migration system failings with airport passport checkpoints left unmanned. Yeah, and as I revealed earlier on as well, you can land at the airport. As long as you've got £2,500, you find yourself with a British passport in no time. Let's go to the Times. Nothing to stop another police killer like Cousins. Inquiry calls for vetting overhaul. Murderer carried out a string of assaults before Sarah Everard. It's this catalogue of things that could have been done to stop Wayne Couzens even being in our police force. Let's go to the Mirror. Yeah. How many more are still hiding in plain sight? Nothing to stop another killer. This is the damning police probe into Sarah Everard's murderer, Wayne Couzens. Let's go to the Sun. Jerry's hubby did send sexts. So he pestered women at HQ. This is Red Bull boss Christian Horner. Apparently, because this is according to The Sun, sent sext messages behind Spice Girl wife Jerry Halliwell's back. So that is a front page on The Sun there. I'm just got in my ear that we can go shortly. We'll be going shortly to the Rochdale by-election again, which of course we'll be bringing to you live here, 12 till 6 p.m, and hopefully we'll be able to maybe speak to one of the candidates there. I'll keep you posted. Before that, I'm joined by my press pack. We've got Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, I've got Director of the Popular Conservatives Mark Littlewood, and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Now, can I zone in quickly, please, on an inside story here, right? Which is North Yorkshire Police apologising to the LGBTQ+ community. So North Yorkshire Police today apologised, and I'm not making this up now, for any historical discriminatory behaviour that any members of the LGBTQ+ community were subjected to by any member of the force. I do have a video of this to bring to you at some point, so I'm hoping that I might be able to do this, because apparently, by all accounts, it looks like a hostage video. So campaigner Peter Tatchell demanded this of them, supposedly, and North Yorkshire Police have submitted a grovelling apology in what looks like a hostage video. Let's do it. Any second now, we get a hostage video.
So as the Chief Constable, it's for me to unreservedly apologise for the hurt and damage historically caused by North Yorkshire Police to our LGBTQ+ communities.
It's an opportunity for us to demonstrate to our work colleagues as well that we welcome them, bringing the whole of themselves into the workplace, and that we're a fully inclusive organisation now.
Thanks, Ed.
What the? What was that? What
Well, look, I think there were questions about the video.
There were a lot of
slightly bizarre, there's slightly bizarre backdrop, but
questions.
there's a serious point here that there are historic injustices to the LGBT community. Look, I sat on this sofa when National Treasure Paul O'Grady died, OK? When Paul O'Grady was performing at the Royal Vauxhall Tavern in the 80s, the police raided it wearing rubber gloves on no pretext, no charges were brought, OK? And then, 30 years later, Paul is mourned as a national treasure because attitudes have changed.
Yes.
There are historic wrongdoings. I'm not sure it needs a video of two police officers against the sort of wallpaper that you saw in the 1980s.
Absolute madness.
So, but this is textbook. So Peter Tatchell wanted North Yorkshire Police, apparently.
Who lives in London.
Right, who lives in London. So North Yorkshire Police do what does look like a hostage video in front of some fake words. Now, can you guess what's happened? Tatchell now wants all police forces to apologise.
Who would have thought?
You don't think this is bonkers, Alison?
Yeah, I mean, they're literally, metaphorically taking the knee to everything, aren't they? I mean, let's apologise to some of the people for not going round to answer when they've been burgled.
Okay.
How about that?
Can I just, sorry to interrupt you, we're going to come back to this. I am going to take you now, our wonderful viewers and listeners, live to the count in Rochdale with GBNews political correspondent Catherine Forster. The Rochdale by-election, the voting has stopped. Catherine joins us now. What's going on? You're at the count. Go on.
Yes, hello, Patrick, welcome back. You can see it's got busier since I spoke to you a bit earlier. They are still verifying. They're at the verification stage. The count has yet to begin. But I'm joined now by the Conservative candidate, Paul Ellison. Paul, thank you very much for talking to us live on GB News. Obviously, this is a seat that you guys are not going to win, are you? But how are you feeling this evening?
We're feeling very confident this evening. It's been a good, positive campaign. It's for Rochdale to succeed. And, yeah, we'll see what goes on this evening.
You've come in for quite a bit of criticism because you apparently took a holiday during the campaign. What's your response to people having a go at you over that?
Family comes first. I love my daughter, and obviously the election's important, but family always comes first.
And what do you make of what's happened with Labour here? The fact that you're here for the Conservatives, the Lib Dems are here, but Labour, the party at the moment tipped to win the next election, are nowhere to be seen.
I'm here on local issues. I have stood in this by-election for the Conservatives for local issues to make Rochdale not a political football, which it has been, and that is why I have stood. And I just want Rochdale to succeed.
And Reform, taking this very seriously, but George Galloway seems to be feeling very, very confident. Are you concerned on the impact that a figure like George Galloway could have if he wins the seat in Parliament tonight?
I'm very concerned about the residents of Rochdale. They just want Rochdale to become a good town again, for an MP that cares, not an MP for, again, using it as a political football. That's all he's here for. If I'm accused of being on holiday, George is here in Rochdale on holiday himself.
Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. Thank you. So back to you now, Patrick, but just to add quickly, George Galloway's team are so confident. We bumped into them when we arrived. They were having a swift half at the hotel. They are loudly confident, so confident, in fact, that they handed out a statement. I'll read you a little bit. Thank you, Rochdale. It's headed. George Galloway has thanked voters of Rochdale for voting in today's historic by-elections. He said thank you to every voter who took the time to send a message to the political class today. More than ever, they are two cheeks of the same backside, and in just a few hours, they are set to get a good kicking. He goes on to say, no matter how you voted today, thank you for doing so. I promise if elected tonight, to be an MP for all Rochdalians, no matter who you voted for. A lot of concern here that an issue, a war being fought thousands of miles away, has basically hijacked an election on what should be local issues. Back to you, Patrick.
Fantastic. Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Forster is at the count for us. Just when you thought the Rochdale by-election couldn't get any more bonkers, George Galloway of the Workers' Party of Britain is released a statement initially saying we're not quietly confident, we're loudly confident. His entire team have gone for a pint down at a local hotel. They've then released a statement calling the Tories and Labour two cheeks of the same backside and that they're about to get a really good kicking. Welcome to British politics.
It's like an Oscar winner delivering the speech before the results are. I mean,
normal operating procedure from George Galloway.
Yeah.
Normal operating procedure.
Well, I hope Rochdale gives them the bums rush tonight.
Ah, there he is. Yes. Okay.
Why is the all-Muslim team going for a swift half then? This is all very strange.
Well, I suppose you got a point, actually. Yeah, yeah. Maybe it was a half of Diet Coke.
Exactly.
Maybe it was a half of Diet Coke. But we will be showing you all of the results and more of that. Catherine's going to do absolutely stellar job for us there. So look, George Galloway's team are incredibly confident. You're shaking your head.
It's just Galloway all the way down the line, isn't it? It's all about him and it's not about Rochdale. And I feel so sorry for the people of Rochdale. Rochdale needs an MP who can stand up for it. The Labour Party let it down, and it must ensure it has a good candidate to stand up for the town next election.
Look, I care deeply about these issues. I want to get back.
He couldn't have put Rochdale on a map 4 weeks ago. His leaflets are all about Gaza.
He wants a referendum on Gaza, Patrick. He doesn't care about Rochdale. He goes into every constituency. He went into Bethnal Green, defeated Una King there on the Iraq War. All he does is he chooses single...
At least we were involved in the Iraq War. He's running in Rochdale to send a message to Benjamin Netanyahu.
Who I think tonight is not watching. He's not watching the count.
Netanyahu's there plugged in, you know.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. I think we do just about have time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. OK, Alison, who's your Greatest Britain, please?
It is Peter Rees-Mogg, a young man present at a talk at Eton by the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who said that Jacob Rees-Mogg was not a good politician. And young Peter stood up and said not only was his father a fantastic man in public and in private, especially as he remained loyal to his wife. What an well said, Peter.
Zinger. Aren't they all called Sixtus and things? Peter's a bit conventional.
But, you know, he got the Hancock love cheat in the whatnot, didn't he?
Good stuff. Go on, Mark.
Honorary nomination, Alex Navalny's widow, Yulia, addressing the European Parliament. I can only think this was a slight mistranslation. Her criticism is that the EU can't stand up to Russia because the EU is boring.
OK.
Nail on the head.
I think we've got a quick clip of this, actually.
If you really want to defeat Putin, you have to become an innovator. You have to stop being boring.
Well, she said it. She said what she said. OK, go on.
She's absolutely amazing. Look, mine's a good news story on this day of woes. It's Adrian Paternoster, who's a 31-year-old from Buckinghamshire. He lost his sight due to an inherited condition over the last couple of years. So he's been focused then since making art to make other people happy. He doesn't sell it. He leaves it around local landmarks around Aylesbury and other bits of Buckinghamshire just for local people to find, because she says sharing his work gives him pure happiness.
I think I kind of wish I'd gone for him now. Anyway, I have gone for Peter Rees-Mogg. Well done, Peter. Get it back in the net.
Never mind saving Russia.
All right. Very quickly, we've got seconds. Alison, Union Jackass, please.
It's the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak
Who
has warned police that mob rule is replacing the democratic order. The same Prime Minister who sacked Suella Braverman for warning about the mob rule.
Mark Rowley, the head of the Met Police, this report today into Wayne Couzens. How many others are there? We've seen this on the front pages. This guy should have sorted the vetting procedure months ago. He's now saying they're still at the lower end of it. He should resign.
Let me get mine in. So it's Jeremy Hunt, who is contemplating, this is absolutely awful, he's contemplating delaying payouts to the victims of the blood scandal so he can cut taxes.
All absolute shockers, it must be said. Today's winner is Sir Mark Rowley, but again, I could have done any of them. Right, thank you very much. What a show this has been tonight. Thank you. Top panel for it as well. Couldn't have asked for any more or better. Headliners next for you for more detailed look at the front pages. But after that, Tom Harwood, 12 till 6. Why? We're Britain's election channel.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, Alex Burgill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. After a wet day